In this video, we're going to be writing this CodeWordChecker class, and basically within the problem statement, it says that it is a string checker, where a string checker is this interface that's defined. A CodeWordChecker is constructed with 3 parameters, 2 integers and a string. First 2 parameters are the minimum and maximum code word lengths, and then the third one represents a string that can't occur in the code word. It can also be constructed with just one parameter, which is that string that can't occur. In this case, minimum maximum lengths will be 6 and 20. Since a CodeWordChecker is a string checker, we will be expected to also implement this isValid method. So let's go ahead and start off with the header of the class first. So we know it is a CodeWordChecker, and then we know since a CodeWordChecker is a string checker that we can implement the StringChecker interface. So that's what our class declaration will look like. So let's go ahead and jump into a little bit of pseudocode. What fields do we think that we're going to have within this CodeWordChecker class? Well, the first one I can think of is the minimum and maximum code word lengths. So minimum code word length, maximum code word length. We need to keep track of this because we're going to need this for our isValid method, where if a word is too long or too short, then we would define it as not valid. Another field I think we might want to keep track of is what the string is that must not occur in the code word. So sort of like our not allowed word. Not allowed word. And I think that should be it for our fields. These are sort of the 3 things that were being passed into one of our constructors. This is the internal data that we'll need for our isValid method. So then we can go into the constructor. So we know we're going to want to write one constructor that accepts 2 integers and a string, the min length, max length, and the not allowed word. So we know we're going to have to write that constructor, but we're also going to have to write another constructor. So sometimes when you have classes, you have more than one constructor, and that just depends on what's being passed into that constructor. So in this case, we also have a constructor that only accepts a string, which is just the not allowed word. And in this case, the minimum length, min length, will be 6, the max length will be 20, just by default. Right? So we've got those 2 constructors, and then finally we also have to implement this isValid method. The reason why is because we're implementing the StringChecker interface, which means that we have to implement any of the methods that are defined in there. So we have to write the isValid method, which returns true if the string is valid within the length requirements and doesn't contain the not allowed word, false otherwise. And that should be about it for our pseudocode. Let's go ahead and actually write our code. So the minimum code word length, this is probably going to be an int because we're representing it as in a number, a discrete number. So private int min word length, and we're just declaring it outside of here. We're going to be initializing it in either one of the constructors. The maximum code word length, we can also assume this is going to be an int. So max word length. And then the not allowed word, the prompt statement says that it's going to be a string that shouldn't occur in the code word. We can assume that this will also be a string for our actual field. So let's call it not allowed. That should be it for all of our declarations of our fields. So let's go ahead and start off with our first constructor. So public CodeWordChecker doesn't have a return type, and we don't say that's void because it's a constructor. So we'd say int, say like min, int max, and then string not allowed word. And then here we're just going to be initializing all of those fields that we declared here. So this dot min word length equals min, this dot max word length equals max, this dot not allowed word equals not allowed, or sorry, this dot not allowed equals not allowed, where we're saying that the left side of our equal sign is our fields, the right side is our parameters. You'll notice here I specifically name the parameters different from the fields. The reason why is, say for example, we called both of these min word length and then we forgot our this. this is a confusing statement, and just to simplify things out, make sure to either use this if you're going to have them have the same name, or just change the name of your parameter in your field. Alright, so that's our first constructor. Second constructor, CodeWordChecker, will only accept that string, and then we set the min length and max length to be as defined, which is 6 or 20. So this dot min word length is 6, this dot max word length is 20, then this dot not allowed is not allowed word. All right, and that should be it for our two constructors. Now we get to the actual meat of our class, which is this isValid method. So public. Since this method is returning a boolean, either true or false, based on if the string is valid or not, we say public boolean is valid, and then we're being passed in some sort of string that we need to check whether the string is valid. So string str. The three conditions that we need this string to pass in order for it to be valid is it's greater than or equal to the minimum word length, it's less than or equal to the max word length, and it also doesn't contain this not allowed string. So let's see, longer than min word length, longer or equal to min word length, shorter than or equal to max word length, and then doesn't contain not allowed. This first check, we want to make sure that it's longer than or equal to min word length. So we would say we can go ahead and save. We can go ahead and save the length of the string into an int, just because we're going to be doing two comparisons here. So int str length is equal to str dot length. So if str length is, so I'm going to do I want to actually return early if the string is not long enough or if the string is too long. So I'm going to say if it's less than min word length, or if the string length is greater than max word length, I'm going to return false. You could set this up in such a way where you're checking for all three of the conditions. I just find it a little bit easier to think through it if I find sort of the opposite of what we're looking for and return early. If it's less than the min word length, or if it's greater than the max length, we're returning false. If it doesn't contain not allowed, so here we want to go to our string class methods. One of the methods that exists there is index of, and this is really helpful because it tells you the index of the string that you pass in. So we can say if str.index of not allowed does not equal -1, so this method returns -1 if it didn't find the string you pass in the string that you call the method on, then it's going to return -1 if it did actually find it. So if it was a valid index, so anywhere between 0 and str.length, then we know that our string actually contains the not allowed word, and in that case we're going to return false as well. If we have a string that is long enough and is not too long and it doesn't contain the not allowed word, then we can actually return true here. You could also write this like return str.index of not allowed equals -1 and str length greater than or equal to min word length and str length is less than or equal to max word length. So you could write it like this as well. I just kind of like this and breaking it up into these segments. That should be it for all of the code that we're actually writing. So let's go ahead and run it through these two examples where we create a new CodeWordChecker with the values 5 for our min word length, 8 for our max word length, and then the not allowed string is a $sign. So we can go ahead and run through each of the method calls. So the first string that gets passed in is happy. So we find the length of that word, which is 5. So then we compare it to our word length. So 5 is not less than 5, and 5 is also not greater than 8. So we don't return false here. And then happy doesn't contain the $sign symbol inside of it, so we also know that it doesn't contain the not allowed word, so we would actually return true for this method call. which is true. The code word is valid. Next word we look at is happy, but now has a $sign at the end, so you might predict what we're going to return here. So the length is now 6, and then we're comparing 6. Is 6 less than 5? No. Is 6 greater than 8? No. So it's good on length, but then when we check the index of the $sign within happy $sign, we're not going to get -1, we're going to get an actual valid index, so we are going to return false here because this string is not valid, unfortunately. Next string we're checking is code. This word is 4 characters long, so is 4 less than 5? Yes, unfortunately it fails that first condition where it is not long enough. It's not at least 5 characters, so we return false. This is not a valid code word. Last method call is happy code. This is 9 characters long. Not going to fail our min word length test, but it is going to fail our max word length test because 9 is greater than 8. It's longer than the code word is allowed to be, so we would return false here. This is not a valid code word. And then for the second example, we create a new code word checker. In this case, since we don't pass in the min and max lengths, we just passed in the not allowed word, we know that we're going to be using our second constructor, which says the min word length is 6, and the max word length is 20, and then the not allowed symbols was actually being passed in, which is pass. So let's go ahead and run through each of those method calls as well. So we have my pass. So this is 6 characters long. So 6 is not less than 6, and 6 is not greater than 20. So we pass the length tests, and then when we're checking for whether my pass, if the index of pass within my pass is a valid index or not, we're going to see that it is actually -1. The reason why is because index of checks for that exact substring. And notice here we have an uppercase P. So if it was my pass, then we would say that the not allowed string is within the code word, but since they do not match, we would say that this would return true, and this is a valid code word. Next method call is my passport. This is 10 letters long. 10 is not less than 6, but it's also not greater than 20, so we pass the word length tests. However, when we check whether the not allowed word is within my passport, you'll notice it is right here, so we are actually going to return false. I'm going to say that this code word is not valid because it contains the not allowed word. Third example we have is happy. So this is 5 letters long. So when we compare it to our minimum requirements, we're going to see that it is too short. We needed it to be at least 6 letters long. 5 is less than 6, so we're going to return false here. This is not a valid code word. Final example is this string that has a bunch of zeros in it. I just counted all the characters and I think it's 21. Hopefully that's correct. 21 is not less than 6, so it passes the min word length test, but then it doesn't pass the max word length test. 21 is unfortunately greater than 20, so this code word is not valid because it is too long. So we will be returning false here. If you get rid of all the pseudocode, here is what our CodeWordChecker class looks like, where we are implementing the StringChecker interface that we're required to. We have 3 fields, one for the minimum word length, one for the max word length, and one for the word that is not allowed to be within the code word. We've got our 2 constructors, one that accepts 3 parameters, one that accepts 1 parameter, where it initializes all the state, and then it sets the min word length and max word length within the constructor, where we're not being passed that as 6 and 20. We have our isValid method, which we were required to implement because we're implementing this StringChecker interface, where we get the length of the string that's being passed in, we compare it to the min word length and max word length, returning false if it fails either one of those, and then we check whether the not allowed string is included within the string that was passed in, returning false if it was included, and otherwise, if it passed all 3 of those checks, we return true. Hopefully that helps you with this CodeWordChecker problem. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below and I'll get back to you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.